Welcome to the Timescales Interviews. I'm Grego, your host. Today I have two special guests, Mike Oden and Aaron Neff of the Global Frequency and Nine Realm Publishing. How's it going?
We're doing good. How about you?
Good, thanks. So you guys are right here in the US, right?
Yes, indeed. I'm in Virginia, and Neff.
Yeah, I'm in Connecticut.
Okay, cool. So what's it like over there on the other side today?
It's sunny for me. It was rainy last night, but so it broke the humidity. It's nice. It's pool day today.
I would second that. It's cool weather. I'd say probably mid 80s, sunshine. Humidity isn't as bad as it's been, which is nice because Virginia in August is generally a horrible swamp. But yeah, it's good weather out today.
Cool. Well, we're praying for some rain about Tuesday. I'm right here in the Bay Area, and there's apparently some massive hurricane that looks like it may actually hit Southern California. And, I hope for the best of everyone down there. And it looks like a residual of that. It may actually bring us some rain. And hopefully a little bit of a cool front, because it's been really hot this summer. So, folks, Mike and Aaron are self-publishing comics and marketing them. And as part of this Comic Creators mini-series, we're going to get into what they have published and what they are publishing and how they're doing it. So, guys, just so we can get to know you a little bit, let's start with when did you start reading comics?
Oh, that's a good question. Oden, do you want to start with that one?
I mean, I can. Yeah. Started as a little kid. My fascination with comics mainly came from when my dad would be deployed. I'd be getting looked after a lot of the time by my two older brothers because my mom was finishing her master's degree program, and so my brothers were in high school. They were my half brothers from my dad's first marriage, and so they were collecting things like Spider-Man, Spawn, which I shouldn't have been reading as a 5-year-old, but he looked really cool. And then I was also watching things like Batman the Animated Series, Spider-Man the Animated Series, all of that stuff, and that's really where my journey with comics began.
So you can tell Oden at 5 years old watching Batman the Animated Series is considerably younger than we are. I started reading grocery store comics, the kind that you got off the spinner rack at the grocery store. So Archie and Alf and G.I. Joe. My first real comic, though, was the Nam. I remember the issue. He got taken as POWs, and the person keeping him as POWs spat in the rice, and I thought that was like really gross. It left an impression on me that I remember to this day. But it's not the type of comic book you should be reading as a child, right? But I loved G.I. Joe and I loved war comics growing up, and that eventually led me to reading mostly Marvel because that's where those titles were coming out. And I think my first foray into reading comic books that I was purchasing on my own, like really on my own, was during the 90s boom, the image boom. So right around like 1989, 1990, when Liefeld was big on the scene. And then they came out with Image with Lee and Silvestri and what was his name that did Shadowhawk? I can't remember. Oh, what's that guy's name?
McFarlane?
No, the guy who did Shadowhawk. He runs Shadow.
Oh, Shadowhawk. I have the book right here too.
Remember his name off the top of my head. Oh well. Then there was Eric Larson, and there was
Silvestri.
No, it wasn't Silvestri. Silvestri did Cyberforce. You were just saying that he's you think that he's a depressing writer. You said it the other day. We're talking about Shadowhawk, the ending of the series. What is his name? I can't remember his name. Doesn't matter. And so I started reading those primarily, and that led me to, reading what would be considered like the alternative comics of the day, the people that were now competing with the big two. That led to Dark Horse and Valiant Sandman. It led to Vertigo and Helix Comics, and you know that's where you get into the more independent style books. Leads to IDW and Boom and other things down the line, just farther and farther away from the big two. So that's pretty much my comics journey.
Okay.
Wound up here in
And it was
self-publishing.
Jim Valentino.
Thank you, freaking Valentino.
That was gonna
He's an
kill-
original founder at Image, and just nobody remembers.
So you actually picked up comics off of a spinner rack at the grocery store.
Yes,
Yep.
that's where I first started reading comic books, and it was a real mixture of stuff. It was Archie and Alf, like I said,
Mhm.
you know, Alf comic books. But there was also I was reading RoboCop and GI Joe at that time too, which is a very interesting eclectic mixture of titles to be reading as a child. And then I said like the next real comic book that I got into was the Nom. And I don't know why I got into that, but like I said, I wasn't really buying my own comic books at the time. My parents were just kind of like, oh, here it's whatever's on the spinner rack. Here's a comic book. Be quiet. Go home.
Okay.
You know, and my uncle would pick me up like 5 or 6 when he would come over. I think it was like every other week, bi-weekly. He'd just come and he'd drop off a stack of comics for me. I love that. Man.
Nice. Now, the spinner rack comics, were they in bags or were they just out in the open where you could just read them?
They were just like flapping out in the open.
Okay.
Even when I was going to comic book stores and buying stuff on my own during the 90s image boom, everything was just open. I would actually go to the comic book shop in the 90s when I was buying my own comic books at the time, which is, you know, like you have to earn money to pay for comics, right? Like it's a habit, right? You have to spend your own money on it. So I would go and I would read like, you know, many of the books that came out just to just be sure that I wanted this one. You know, like you flip through it and sometimes you like, you know, start really reading it. And the guy who ran the shop was very, very cool. He even, you know, like let you like loiter and read longer than you should have. And there was like it was a scene at the comic book shop, right? You had the kids who were older and they were in high school, like, you know, late high school, going to college. They were all smoking cloves and hanging out by the Sandman books. And you know, you had the kids who were all really excited that, you know, they were reading Spider-Man and they were reading X-Men and X-Force and all the stuff coming out from Marvel. And then you had like the kids like me who were consuming absolute garbage at the time and loving every minute of it because 90s intensity was revolutionizing comics. I mean, the visual style that came out in the 90s really, really shook up what people thought of industry comics.
Right. Now, Mike, you said that your dad was stationed somewhere. Did you start reading comics overseas?
No. I was here. So my dad was an officer in special forces. So every now and again he would end up having to go off to mission, and we would be back behind. You know, and so there'd be a lot of times where I wouldn't see my dad for a while. And that made like the moments that he was there like a really big thing for me. But no, like we lived predominantly in Arlington, Virginia, most of my childhood. So I got it when I was getting into comics. It was still very much like a local thing. And then, you know, as I said, I piggybacked off a lot of my older brother's collection of books. And you know, my dad he wasn't a huge comic head. He had his favorite characters, but like he would buy me an occasional comic from time to time. And then the other big thing that he would do is he would read stories of like the Iliad and the Odyssey to me as like my bedtime stories, and that, you know, cultivated the interest and fascination in heroes, which then obviously carried over into more comic stuff, because comics are really that sustained tradition of heroic storytelling that goes back to classical antiquities. So yeah.
Okay.
Oh, nerd, get that like literature garbage out of here with your whole like educated self. Why you gotta go and be all articulate and shit?
All right. I'm seeing some pilot flames here in arts. Now, what I'm wondering, is with other entertainment in arts and performing arts, are you guys into music?
Yeah, all sorts
I
of
mean,
different types.
I like it. I don't know if I'm
Yeah.
into music. Someone like Shelley Bond is very into music. Like we just covered her book Punk's Not Dead that she's editing with her husband who's writing and their friend who's drawing. Like that's being into music, right? Like knowing information about bands and the history of the lead singer. And I'm not that type of into music. I'm
I
the type of into
I
music where I can put on an album and listen to it and like it and appreciate it. But I don't know. It's like when you're young and you're reading comics, you don't know who's drawing, you don't know who's writing.
Mm.
You're into the story of the comic, you're into the art of the comic. You really don't know anything about the production element or who's responsible for that stuff. So that's music. I like music. I don't know a whole lot about it.
I enjoy music a good deal, on a whole bunch of different levels. So like, you know, my mom was really into like theater and everything growing up. And when like the first major job that I remember her getting was she was working at the Kennedy Center. So I got a very early introduction to musical theater, Les Mis, Phantom of the Opera, Cats, all of that stuff. So I have a great appreciation on music on that end. But even when I was like a teenager, I was getting into Warped Tour scene
Less
of
than
bands.
Jake.
And like I have followed a whole bunch of bands that like I follow religiously. I know exactly what they're doing. Like I even had like an idea for a story based around one of my favorite musical artists that I think could have made it big if he did not have his own demons that constantly would undercut him. And
It's
so
actually a good story too. Like he's given me the pitch. I would definitely be interested in seeing what comes out of that. It's good.
um but like so yeah, like and to that effect, like when I write, I like to create playlists for what I'm writing. Like I've done I like it just helps me kind of get into the right headspace, is listening to effectively other people's stories emoted through song can help me fuel what I want to put into mine. And so I do that between obviously like sung lyrics, and then there are a whole bunch of instrumental pieces that will evoke specific things. So yeah, no, I consider myself pretty into music.
Okay, awesome. Now, apparently some people can listen to music while they're reading, and I can't do that. My brain doesn't work that way. But
Me
can
neither.
you guys listen to music while you're reading? And the
Yes.
second part, can you listen to music while you're writing?
I
Yes to both.
actually have to
Yes to
listen to
both.
music when I write, but it can't be music with lyrics that I
There
know
you
or
go.
can discern,
Yep.
because then the lyrics, the meaning in the song is permeating the language that I'm using to convey meaning through my writing. It's a very semiotic kind of storytelling where you're using language and symbols to communicate, or signs to communicate the symbolic, language, the meaning in the language. I don't know if I could explain to that correctly. So I listen to a lot of Toho Japanese speed metal when I type because it's all very up tempo. The guitars are fantastic, harmonic solos, that kind of stuff, and that just keeps me moving. It's like caffeine, like there's a driving rhythm to it, and beautiful, expressive musicality. But I can't listen to anything with discernible lyrics that I understand. I can listen to like stuff in German and like
Okay.
music from Scandinavia. I don't know what it means, but anything that has words that are going to mean stuff to me, that
Right.
screws me.
Okay, now that's interesting because I have actually identified this trait with other writers where they can and do listen to music when they're writing, but not with a human voice. So it sounds like in your case, unless you're fluent in Japanese, you can listen to Japanese music because the human voice or the lyrics are not going to distract you as you write. Is that correct?
Specifically the lyrics. I love, like, the human voice is very expressive, right? Japanese Toho speed metal is like screaming American metal, except they're screaming in Japanese.
Mhm.
And I really appreciate that because I love metal. Metal is very expressive. You have melodic metal, you have death metal, and you have, speed metal. Um, and it's very energetic.
Mhm.
But when something is screaming and your ear is naturally trying to make sense of the stuff that it hears, right? So if there is a discernible dialect that has meaning, and words are coming out that you recognize, your brain is going to be distracted by that. And you're going to be partially trying to decode those things, at least in my experience. When I'm writing,
Right.
I have to be focused on using my own language to convey meaning. And I can't be partially decoding something else, because otherwise it's going to confuse or muddle my own language. But
Okay.
yeah, human voice definitely is part of the musicality of a lot of music, right? Like, you need the human voice in many ways to convey that expression, just not in English, please.
Right. Now, I actually did see a Japanese speed metal concert live in Tokyo in March,
Who was
and
playing?
I don't remember because they were actually outside of a Shinkansen train station. I say Tokyo. It was actually a different town, a little bit north of Tokyo, and it was completely unexpected. We got off the train and we were going to go get some lunch, and the band was just setting up there in the street, and it was crazy. They
That's
attracted
dope. Yeah.
thousands of people. Well, we didn't know what they were doing when they started setting up drums and speakers and all of that. It got pretty elaborate, and when they started jamming, there was only maybe a couple of dozen people there. But a few songs later, I turned around to look back, and it was people as far as you could see, all the way to the train station. So, and I
Japan
had
is
no idea
wild.
because yeah, I don't understand Japanese. My wife is Japanese, so we go to Japan quite a bit. But I can tell what people are talking about if I know them. And I know what the conversation would be about, then I can understand what they're saying, but I'm not fluent in it. So that's interesting, touching on the human voice there and being able to listen to music while writing, just as long as you don't understand the lyrics. Now, Mike, can you listen to music? Let's say just randomly, let me pick a San Francisco band, Metallica. Can you listen to Master of Puppets when you were writing a story?
If that was part of like my writing, like I specifically build up my writing playlist to have for, like, okay, I'm writing this kind of sequence, like, especially when I'm doing like a comic script, because there's comic scripts in particular, it's a blend between creative writing and technical writing. There's a whole aspect where you're having to plan out panels and give directions to the artist of, like, this is what you want to have done. And like, I have, when I'm writing a script, the way that everything's happening in my head is like there's a movie playing, right? And so like I'll pick out specific things. So like Master of Puppets, I might have on like an epic like war sequence and be like a modern war sequence. And yeah, I'd be able to write to that. But like I know, speaking of Metallica, I have Fade to Black on one of my playlists, I think for The Field, which is a character that we've got in development. But like Fade to Black is one of my favorite songs by Metallica. That and One. So
One's a dope song.
yeah,
One's
it's
really good.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Um,
The, the
and
the solo at the end, the guitars.
oh,
Oh, it's so good.
no, I know it's so good. But yeah, so like I'll be able to do that. Now to that point, I try whenever I'm writing, like, because again, going into the whole splitting between technical writing and then the creative writing of doing like dialogue, for instance. When I'm doing dialogue writing, I try to make sure that I'm listening to an instrumental piece, because I do think that when I'm writing an interpersonal conversation between dialogue, I want to, as Ness was even saying, is like if you understand what they're saying, there is a subconscious thing to kind of start to match cadence of characters to whatever right, to whatever you're listening to, because you're hearing it and it's in your subconscious mind, and so it's just you're not even thinking about it. But like, so like for like writing dialogue and interplay between characters, everything like that, I try to stick with more instrumental pieces. Or if I do have like, I have Survive Said the Prophet, Survive Said the Prophets, Mukajo is on one of a whole bunch of my playlists, because it's something that I don't understand the words to. It's a Japanese metal band. Is the opening for Vinland Saga. It's incredible. And it's epic. So I can literally just listen to it while I'm writing both battle sequences and writing dialogue.
Didn't you
Okay.
have like Golden Wind on repeat while you were writing SPQR, and you had like an hour loop of Golden Wind?
So yes, I did. Yeah, I had Golden Wind and Sonochi no Sadame.
Sonochi no Sadame. Did I send you us doing the
Yes, you
karaoke
did. I
version of
was so
that?
happy with that, because you literally did it from me. It was like, hey man, we're here doing karaoke and we're thinking of you.
Yeah.
So we did Sonochi no Sadame for one of the karaoke rounds, and I was like, you guys are great.
It's when we actually just got back from Japan at the beginning. We came back last month.
That's
2
right. I
days
remember you guys.
before
I was going to ask you about that.
before we launched Judex, actually, which we'll eventually talk about, I'm sure.
Yeah, we're gonna get to that here pretty quick.
Yeah, we were out there for 5 weeks, I think, and it was just, oh, it was so wonderful. It's very inspiring. There's a lot of exciting stuff to do, but really, like, just the day-to-day elements living there, that you notice make it a separate experience from living in the US. Like, culturally,
Yeah.
it's
Well,
remarkable.
we would actually like to move there if it was not for our jobs at present. And
Yeah.
there are some older people that live out in those beautiful mountains with the onsens, and they've never heard of the United States, and they don't care. I mean, it is a completely different world. And one thing that I found to be surprising is that a person in a neighborhood can sustain just by eating at the convenience stores.
Yep. They're
The
actually, convenience
yeah,
stores are
the
great. They're
the
like, they're
7-Elevens and
affordable.
Family
Family Mart.
Mart and
Yeah.
Lawson.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Lawson's great too.
yeah. So okay, we're gonna jump into comics here real quick. I wanted to tell you guys a little thing about Metallica though. Metallica started right here in San Francisco, and they started as a garage band, and I used to go and see them occasionally. A friend of mine that I went to college with knew somebody that was working on sound with them, not one of the actual band members. So we got to see them when they were getting started, and they used to tell people to bring a cassette recorder and record their concert, and then trade the tapes and share them with friends. That's one of the things that Metallica actually fully endorsed when they were starting. You
That's
guys
really
ever
cool.
heard? Yeah, it was a good way of marketing.
That's
And
funny how much they changed. You remember
oh
how ours was like
yes,
so anti
okay,
Napster? It's
that's what I
funny how
was just gonna
things
ask. Have you
change.
guys heard of Napster? I got
Yeah.
banned
Yeah.
from Napster by Lars Ulrich. Yeah,
You're
I
kidding.
swear he did it.
Oh,
I swear he did that. Which song was it that I was downloading? I was downloading one, Nothing Else Matters. When Napster started, I was like, oh, this is cool. I mean, I think everybody only had dial-up modems, so it was slow as hell. It would take like 3 hours to download a 3-minute song, and I was downloading Nothing Else Matters, and all of a sudden it comes across my screen. You've been banned by Lars Ulrich, and I'm thinking, the irony.
Man, I
That's how
have
they
this
got
on cassette. Like, what are you talking
right.
about?
You used
I
to tell
recorded
us.
this back in
Right.
like, 1980
Right. It's
something.
like, dude, you used to
oh,
tell us to record these and share them. So anyway, okay. Before we jump into comics here, the one last question on getting to know you guys in the areas of arts and performing arts. Are you into movies or television?
oh boy, am I. So before I started doing comics specifically, I was a freelance industry journalist that specifically reviewed comics, comic book
Really?
film, and a whole bunch of stuff. But like those are like the things I was probably best known for. I wrote for initially Movie Pilot. I went through their verified creator program while I was deployed. And then I worked for Heroic Hollywood for about 3 weeks, which was utterly miserable. And then I tried to start up several of my own little blogs, and then I finally ended up with a small scale self startup one called Up Your Geek that I still occasionally do stuff for.
Really? Okay. Very interesting.
I have an MFA from Columbia University in
Really?
screenwriting, and I've
Wow.
worked in broadcasting. So
Man,
I'd
I'm
say
glad
I'm
I
in the
asked this
film and
question.
television.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that is really interesting. So let's jump off into comics here. I spent some time, and first of all, thank you for doing this, you guys. When I ran into you online, I don't remember quite where it was. I was recognized immediately. I thought, okay, this right here is a story that needs to be heard, because there are other people out there that want to do the same thing that you guys are doing, and they can learn from you. So in preparing to speak with you this morning, I poked through every single bit of your website, and I believe that's yours, Neff, which is mavericks.com, and that is MAVRICS.com. And on there, you can order Mavericks Origins Volume 1. Now, I have to say, it is one of the best websites I've seen for self-marketing a comic or a book. I love the trailer, and anybody that has not seen that needs to see that trailer. It really made me wonder how you sourced the voiceover, because that is really super good. And I used to do voiceovers, and that's why I picked up on that. That's an excellent professional trailer right there. But I'm wondering, could you tell us, obviously with Mavericks Origins being volume 1, it is the first of a series, and I did see a second one on there as well. Can you tell us about that and what your plans are for it in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Mavericks Origins is broken into two parts, parts one and Mavericks Origins Volume 2.
Mhm.
It's broken on a cliffhanger that I got a lot of shit for from a lot of people, because they were like, how dare you break the story at such an exquisite stopping point that is yet, a pivotal moment we desperately need more. So it was friendly shit, right? I think Oden will tell you, he was like, oh man, that's great. I can't wait for the second one. So the second part is I couldn't do the whole thing all in one shot. 190 pages or something like that is too much to do in self-publishing without knowing whether or not you've got something. So
Mhm.
70 pages, 72 pages, I think, was more doable. I'm paying for the art myself, right? I'm the writer. So I'm paying for the art, I'm paying for the editing. We're doing our own pre-press, but then I have to pay for the print, right? And I've got to pay for all of the other stuff that goes along with it. And
Shipping.
there's a financial investment, because I'm not relying on the crowdfunding campaign to pay for the production of it. I'm producing it myself. I'm relying on the crowdfunding campaign to recoup some of those expenses, which means that I'm only going to put in a certain amount, see if I can recoup it, and then good, we did that. We can do the second one. So the second volume of Mavericks finishes up the Battle of Ulaanbaatar. And you watched the trailer, so it's about 6 pilots on a mission to evacuate some refugees from a war zone behind enemy lines. And they run into more than they bargained for, and then it turns into a desperate fight for survival. Mavericks Origins Volume 2 details specifically what that fight looks like and the 2 different developments during that fight that even up the stakes from even just 6 pilots fighting for their lives. And it shows you really that this is part of a larger scheme. Mavericks Origins 2, Volume 2 is in development, but we've got Mavericks Operation Vesuvius coming out next, which is a self-contained not I'm not giving you another cliffhanger. It's a self-contained mission that happens simultaneously or concurrently with the battle for Ulaanbaatar, that is Maverick's origins. And so in the end of Maverick's Origins Volume 1, I detail that, in Ulaanbaatar, they're trying to get out the refugees, but those refugees have something special in their possession that they're using to trade for or bargain for their freedom. And that's half of the information that the Northern Continental Alliance, the Northern forces, need to defeat their enemy. The other half is on a computer server in the Kuril Island chain in Kamchatka. So it's on the other side of the world in Russia. So the Mavericks Operation Vesuvius is about that mission to secure, that piece of the information. And we have a different artist on that than we did on the first book. That'll be coming out next year, along with a bunch of other cool supplemental stories that flesh out or build out the Mavericks universe.
Neff,
And one of those is written by my good friend Michael Oden.
so before you even talk
right,
about
this guy right here.
But before we even talk about my story, you just glossed over, like, oh, we have a different artist on Vesuvius. Please don't sell yourself short. Tell him who the artist is.
So we have Hector Trunick from Astrobots and Heavy Metal. He's quite a prolific talent. His style it lends itself specifically towards robots and mecha, and his textures and colors are fantastic. I've actually been dying to work with Hector for at least 2 years. We came across him while we were drawing, Maverick's Origins. We actually had to, my first artist, Garrett and I, since it was both of our first book, we did I'd say 60 pages. And when we brought on our editor, he was like, no, redo it all. So we did the book twice. But I'd seen Hector's stuff while we were doing those first 60 pages. I was blown away by it. And I was like, oh man, if I could work with this guy. So we have him on Vesuvius, and it's really exciting. I'm starting to see pages come back now, and we're planning to release it or run it next August. So about a year from now, there's about a year of development that goes into a 70, 80 page story.
Okay.
Yeah, and to that effect, as somebody who very frequently browses portfolio sites and everything like that, scoping new talent, if you look up Gundam on ArtStation, 3/4 of the professional work that you will see on ArtStation is done by Hector. It's absolutely phenomenal.
Gundam. Okay.
Yeah. But
he's got a great eye for talent too. He's actually the reason that we have Fabrizio Ugolini on Judex. He found Fabrizio as an artist, and he has an incredible eye for talent. So if Oden's telling you Hector's good, I think
yes, Hector is very, very insanely good. And then I think Neff was mentioning my little story that I'm contributing to the next book, to one of the next campaigns, which is very exciting as well. It's actually how we started working together. Was I had been on one of his shows to promote one of my books, and we hit it off. And the more that I learned about Mavericks, the more that I loved it, and I wanted. And then Neff had to offhandedly mention that he was looking at bringing in a whole bunch of different creators to do stories, and I was like, I got one for you, and I pitched him it, and we worked on it, and now 9 drafts later, we're there.
Nice. Okay.
It was one of the reasons that I felt that I could work with Oden directly as a collaborator, not just as an editor, because he has incredible tenacity and dedication to making something the very best that it can be. So there isn't any real ego in the way of taking something to the next level. So if he sends something back and I'm like, well, this doesn't work, this part's great. How can we keep this, but make these 2 other things work? And we can develop that into something. There's no, well, I really like that. I don't like that you don't like the thing that I like. That doesn't make a workable relationship when you're trying to make an incredible story. And Oden's not kidding. He did 9 drafts on MSS,
Wow.
and I'll say it's probably the strongest, best crafted of the stories that we've got so far in the can, ready for art on the next Mavericks campaign, which is, stories and side missions plus Vesuvius. They've got a bunch of writers writing stories for that, and I'm really satisfied with Oden's. It's a bar that I'm measuring everybody else up to.
Okay, nice. For folks that are listening to this and this sounds interesting to you, head over to mavericks.com. It is MAVRICS.com. And we're talking about Origins Volume 1. And here's a little bit of a description from the website. This is a sci-fi epic. Elite pilots in robotic combat suits wage war on the battlefield of tomorrow. Mavericks, Origins Volume 1 is a 108-page, oversized 9x12 graphic novel in the style of Gundam's 8th MS Team. Mavericks features giant mecha, special forces, soldiers, and global superpowers with secret agendas trying to take over the world. Order your copy today. Sounds pretty badass. I want this.
It is a great book. I've read it for pleasure, I've read it 5 times. For work,
Really?
I've read it close to 20 at this point. The cover that I have read that I have read the most is falling apart at this point, because I've been through it so much. It is a fantastic book, and it is genuinely great, and there's something I do not say a lot about with a lot of indie books, and that's Neff set a very high standard for his competition, and I am humbled that he puts me on the same level as he's at, because he is absolutely fantastic at what he does.
Well, I can say it with confidence that you're on my level because we did Judex.
That's
I
fair.
see firsthand that you're on the level. I am honored that you think so highly of me, but that also reflects very well on you. It's meaningful. That's really the best reward, is that recognition from your peers, right? Sales are great. I love meeting fans. When you put a book out and they love it, it's great to see them in person, or to get emails being like, I thought this book was fantastic. When's the next one coming out? How can I order my copy? Mm-hmm. Or we were at conventions leading up to the fulfillment of Mavericks, and we had the 10-page physical teaser of the 10 pages that we had digitally put up on the campaign page, and people were buying that. And then when we were at the convention after we had fulfilled and we had the physical book available, they were coming back being like, I saw this, I remember this, oh, is this it? Oh, I want it. That was great.
There you go.
And I think the best reward in all of that is just a simple good job. You did good from your peers, Mike saying that, Bancroft saying he read Mavericks and really enjoyed it, Joe Sontag saying he liked the book. That's the type of reward that makes me feel like, okay, it's worth putting in another $20,000 to make another ridiculously big, production, and pull that off, put all the time and effort and work and blood, sweat, and tears into that. And Oden will tell you, making something that you pour your heart into, not only does it take the time and the money, but it's a labor, and then and getting someone to say, I see what you did and I'm glad you did it. Thank you. Please do it again. That's all I need.
It is absolutely the integral fuel. And I do think it is. It's not just about the fan validation. It is the peer-to-peer validation, because it's a tough road. It's an arduous thing. It's worthwhile. Nothing and what have you, nothing in life that is worth doing isn't going to be a scorcher. But when you get the pat on the back from the people that are doing this too, that see what
People who you
that
admire
know the
also.
grind, that know everything that gets put into this, and they pat you on the back and go, "Yo, man, you did good here. Keep it up. You got this." It gives you the extra octane in the tank.
Okay, nice. Now, you guys, I think just touched on one of the other questions I was going to ask about marketing. The next thing I was going to ask is, did Mavericks start with crowdsourced funding, and do you also market at conventions?
Yeah, so Mavericks did start off getting attention through crowdfunding. It was kind of a grassroots marketing, going around talking to other creators who were in the indie comic scene, getting on YouTube shows, on podcasts like this one, reaching out to other people who were in similar situations and cross promoting campaigns, building up a mailing list, that kind of stuff. That's definitely how we began the marketing for Mavericks. But then there was an advertising element on top of it, which I think made the campaign uh, as successful as it was. It's true, we got a lot of support from the indie comics community, but then there was like a whole level of fan interest, and that came from conventions that we traveled around and went to, where we sold teaser comics, where we sold stickers and pins and merch and stuff to get Mavericks into people's mind, to put the IP in front of them. But we also ran ads. We also had an ad campaign and an advertising budget, and that helped too. So it really does, like, if you're going to do this, you have to, and you want to succeed to a degree, you really have to be willing to fire on all cylinders and go all in and invest in your brand. That's I guess the secret to it is, are you willing to dedicate yourself? Currently in crowdfunding, there's a guy named Pixel Trader. He did AR13L, the Little Mermaid, with Eric Hodson, who actually did the logo for Judex. And I think Piper was the writer on that book. He went balls deep on his marketing, his advertising, and his merchandising. And his advertising campaigns are something else. Like he really like raised the bar on how to approach selling a comic. And it's cool because I talked to Pixel a lot about like the strategies we used, and what he's doing, and about how much it costs to do this thing, what about putting this, what about the standees, what about trading cards, and all that other stuff. But he invested in his brand, and it shows. He's one of the first to break 10K over on Fund My Comic, right? So
Mhm.
like, power to him. If you're gonna do this, do it. Believe in yourself, and other people believe in you.
Okay. All right, now we're going to move on to Judex, and because you do have an Indiegogo campaign, which is massively impressive going right now. But there's just two other things I wanted to ask about you guys, so that the watchers and listeners will know you a little bit better. What I'm wondering is, do either of you have an education, a formal educational background in writing or illustrating?
I do.
Uh,
Okay.
I I'm a history major. Um, so like, not to the creative standpoint, but I have taken multiple professional classes on story structure. Um, I studied the classics. I've read. I like it. So the answer is technically no, but I put in my time.
Okay.
Like you cannot expect to write good storytelling without understanding those fundamentals, and that takes time and that takes personal investment to go and find that out.
I'd
Okay.
say Oden's a very prolific writer because he understands the mythological and creative side of history. Like, he can tell you all about Greek myths. He can tell you about Sumerian myths. He can tell you about all sorts of fictional stories. And then he can quote to you the history of both Punic Wars, down to who was at what battle, what the generals did, what their strategic formations were, how many forces were lost. I mean, like he is.
I can't do that on the first Punic War. We
Oh,
lost
the
Polybius.
second Punic War. Okay, sure. And what were you just did a live stream on who Belisarius?
Yeah, Belisarius.
Who does a live stream on Belisarius? Like the thing is, Oden is a
More people
scholar.
should. He's great. Rome's last great general.
If I were to credit somebody having that degree of knowledge, wealth of information, Oden really is a scholar. So don't let him being like, oh, I have a history degree. Don't be fooled. Like the man could teach history courses if he wanted to. I've seen his analytical papers. I've proofread his analytical papers. They're quite good.
I have one that's in peer review right now.
Yeah, academia is something that Oden can handle really well. As for myself, I am a comparative literature major. I have a BA in comparative literature and a minor in communications from Fordham University, and I have an MFA in film and screenwriting from Columbia University. So I have a formal education in it.
Okay. All right. Now, as far as reaching a point where you decided I'm going to become an independent comic creator or graphic novel creator, did either of you have mentors behind you, supporting you, friends or family around you that might have said, okay, you're really good at this and you should do that? Has anyone uplifted you or supported you or mentored you in any way?
You want to answer this one first? Or you want me to go?
I can let you go.
All right. So when I was at school at Columbia, I had a teacher named David McKenna. He did American History X. He and I formed a close relationship, student teacher, strictly platonic. But he encouraged me, said, "You're an incredible developmental guy. You can take a pitch and go to an outline like nobody else. If you stop smoking so much weed, you could be huge in Hollywood." I didn't want to go to Hollywood. Hollywood scares the crap out of me. But I did stop smoking so much weed and got to story making. So he was very inspiring in, hey, go out there and make stories, write stories. And, he believed in my scripts. I learned a lot from him. The second person who really encouraged me on a professional way was Jake Thomas. He's currently the executive editor at Humanoids, the publisher. They're releasing the Incal. They did a lot of stuff. They got a lot of heavy metal talent too, because heavy metal just kind of died and a lot of people went there. But Humanoids it's a great publisher. They just reworked everything. And Jake was the editor on Mavericks. And when he read the script the first time, he was like, I can't put this down. And he gave me some input and advice and told me, look, go be a writer. You've got chops for this. You can make this happen. And then, of course, there's my wife who looks at me spending all of this money on comic books and hiring Oden and hiring writers and hiring artists. And she's looking at the bills stacking up, but she's like, I know
It's research.
She's like, I know you do. I know you can do this. This is what you want to do professionally right now. So I believe in you. And she's seen what we put out. She even has her own comic book in development. And I honestly think it might be better than Mavericks. It's fucking good, man. Like it's good. So I'm lucky to have people believe in me. And then peers like Oden. When Oden says, hey man, let's do a thing, you're good at this. That's uplifting and that pushes you to keep going. But other than that, my family, I have an aunt and uncle, but I think for the most part, everyone else in my family is gone. So it's really been professional relationships that have inspired me to continue to start and continue writing.
Okay, Mike.
So I mean, my dad has always been a big pusher of my creative. Both my mom and my dad have always noticed that I have a penchant for storytelling and everything. But in terms of doing the actual comic stuff, a lot of that was more geared towards self-motivation. Like I've had I've had people throughout my life that have recognized that I have an ability to tell stories. But doing the comics thing was really a result of being put in, effectively being a piece of coal and being put into a furnace and having the option to either crumble or do something. And I chose to do something. Um, you know, as I said, prior to doing this, I was doing a lot of freelance industry journalism where I was giving critique on film. At this point in time, the Snyder DC films are out, and I had written a lot of things about how those films could have handled things better. And so I had people asking me if I thought why I wouldn't go out there and try telling my own stories. And at the time, indie wasn't really on my radar, and so I'm like, you can't just walk into any of these studios. They don't accept unsolicited pitches. That's not how this goes.
Mhm.
And I think the exact moment that I decided that I was actually going to try and write a comic script and actually dedicate myself to it was, I took a massive swing at bat. I had this treatment for a shadow animated series. And so I knew that Dynamite had been publishing the books of the Shadow, who was a favorite character of mine. And at the time, Dynamite actually had on their website the phone number for their director of creative projects on the site. And so I called and I left the guy a voicemail. And I wasn't expecting to hear anything back from him. Within an hour, I get a call.
Nice.
And he asked me, like, okay, so what's your pitch? And I went through, and it was like effectively what I had wanted to do was this kind of Death Note style series where you have a police officer who's trying to bring down the Shadow, but he's been brought inside the Shadow's ring of agents, and so he's trying to bring it down from the inside, but the Shadow's playing the officer to get information on the criminal networks in New York. And so they're having this kind of tete-a-tete of wits throughout the entire thing. And I talked to this creative director for about 45 minutes on the phone. And he listens to me, doesn't interrupt me at all. And at the end of it, he goes, "That's fantastic. There's just one problem. One, we've never had the animated rights for the Shadows. I can't really help you there. But two, we just lost the print rights for the character last year. But if we had those still, we'd be pairing you up with one of our veteran writers and we'd get you on." And that was the moment I knew, it was like, okay, I can do something about this. And around this point in time was when crowdfunding was really starting to be a more viable thing. And there was more, more public notice on, the successes of Kickstarters, and Indiegogo was an up and comer, and there was a lot of crowdfunding in comics. And so I decided that I would start working on a script, and I separated from my now ex, and to kind of deal with, try and keep my head hold up and on the horizon to keep pushing forward. I just started doing the books, and it became a way for me to deal with hardship and take what I was going through and turn it into something else, as not just for me, but for my kid.
Fine. Okay, the next questions that I'm going to have for you guys are going to touch on editing, and then I have a question about something called CG, Comicsgate, which I don't quite understand, but I'm trying to learn more about what that is. But I wanted to go back to cannabis for just a second, Neff. Now, I'm familiar with it. I have scoliosis, and with that, which is curvature of the spine, and some of the time that can cause intense pain where you just can't sleep. And I don't like to take drugs. So my doctor had prescribed an opioid, which I took a few times, did not care for it. plus they can be addicting. So I threw those away, and I found that cannabis is effective for pain relief of scoliosis. Now that being said, and which of course it is fully legal here in California. Um, I do not believe that it should be getting into the hands of kids at all, because kids' brains are not developed until their mid-20s, and they don't need to be ingesting anything herbal that can interfere with their brain development. But using it as herbal pain relief, I am familiar with the effects of it that can enhance arts and performing arts. Now, it's difficult to discuss cannabis with writers very often, for obvious reasons. They don't want to go on record as being a cannabis user. But what I mentioned, what you mentioned was that you had a mentor that suggested that you reduce. Now, did the reduction actually assist in creativity?
I wouldn't say that the reduction assisted in creativity. The reduction assisted in a more professional demeanor, which at the
Okay.
time was kind of necessary in order to navigate the type of professional relationships one needs to cultivate in order to work in film and television. I don't smoke weed now, but as you can tell, I'm also not the most professionally inclined individual. I just don't give a fuck.
I don't smoke it either. That's
But
going
that's
to
the
damage your
thing.
lungs.
Yes, and I was in grad school at the time. Um, when I was younger, I smoked, but I didn't inhale. Um, but being fully developed, it was both recreational, but at the same time, it was used to it was a means to an end, and the end was definitely to enhance one's imaginative capacity. Like, we would smoke and then hang out and talk about crazy ideas. And out of those ideas would come sometimes decent setups, right? Decent premises for stories. Very rarely did any of the work we actually did, like any of the writing that we actually did when we were high, amount to anything of quality. But premise, setup, pitch, basically, was really, I'd say we did a lot. We would accomplish a lot of that because it was inspiration, it was creativity, it was throwing out ideas. And what I specialized in at the time was taking those pitches, turning them into full outlines, and that were ready to go to scripting, that were ready to go into typey, and then line editing. But at the time, it was film, right? It was TV. It wasn't layouts for
Mhm.
comics. And so Oden mentioned like seeing it like a film. When you do comics, I find that I see it more as still shots where each image is a frame that you need to arrange in composition to make a sequential narrative. And Kubrick films when he
Mhm.
directs, it's that way. He imagines frames in sequence becoming film. But for comics, it's their orientation, alignment, and placement on the page and characters staging within those frames that creates the reading experience. When you bring an outline to a script for film and TV, it's written differently than when it's written for comics.
Mhm.
So I'm not entirely certain whether or not the same thing could be said doing, smoking weed and making comics these days. I know there are people who say it's very helpful.
Mhm.
I also know that it can be distracting. It's hard to write when you're high. It's easy to throw out ideas into a hat, some of them good, some of them bad, kick around things and workshop it, but actually working is not easy when you're high, at least not for me.
Okay, cool. All right, very interesting. All right, now shifting gears here completely. With editing, I was going to ask you guys if you have an editor, and I know you do now. And my own personal experience, the very first time I learned what an editor was with a book that I read until the cover fell off, like you were mentioning, Mike, where you were reading Mavericks and until the cover was getting worn. In my situation, it was Star Wars, a novel published, I believe, in December of 1976, before the movie Star Wars came out. And it was just Star Wars. It wasn't A New Hope. It wasn't Part 4 or anything like that. It was just plain Star Wars. And the cover of that book, it was a glossy gold cover when it hit the grocery store book stands, and it said George Lucas up at the top of it, which would sort of imply that it was written by George Lucas. And I later found out that it was ghost written by an author named Alan Dean Foster. And that book right there was also edited. Now, the thing that I loved about the book after the film finally came out, I guess maybe 4 or 5 months later, was that the book had additional things in it that were not in the film. And being a kid that would ride my bike to the theater and pay to get in to see Star Wars once and then sit there and watch it over and over again all day long. You used to be able to do that. Once you were in the theater, just stay there. I found it interesting that there were additional scenes, such as Jabba the Hutt. Jabba the Hutt was actually on Tatooine in the original Star Wars, but that was not in the film. That was cut out, edited. When I found out that that book that I read that many times till the cover fell off had been edited by somebody, I was really upset about it, because I thought, you know what? Whose right is it to go and remove something from a book that I bought before I even bought it that I might have enjoyed? So I had a very negative opinion towards editors. Now, what I'm wondering is, since you have hired your editors, I'm presuming, have you ever had an editor that wanted to cut something out so dear to heart to you that you absolutely refused, or do you actually go along with what the editor suggests, kind of knowing it's for the best because they're a professional editor? Where is there a middle ground
So
there?
two parts to this.
Okay.
First thing, you don't hate editors. You hate adapters. You
Yeah.
hate people who take a manuscript, like a book, right? And then
Well, I'm not
sit
saying I hate
down.
editors. That was
Okay.
just
Your
yeah.
animus, your animus was towards adaptation. And that's very
Really?
understandable. It was very
Okay.
understandable because people will read a book, and the amount of storytelling you can put into a 300-page book is extensive. The amount of time it takes someone to sit down and read that book is well in excess of 90 minutes. But our job in film is to tell a complete and compelling story that does not lose pace and does not fail to achieve the storytelling objective or lose the audience's interest in 90 minutes. And that's a pretty demanding thing, because you're transferring or you're transporting that work of fiction into an entirely different medium. Now you're using stuff like sound and music and lighting to convey a lot of the descriptive details in the text. So luckily you can hack out entire chunks of the writer describing the feel of the scene, because the director can interpret that from the text and reproduce or take their own spin on it and generate that using film techniques. This is Film School 101. The problem that you had was when someone took something from the narrative and removed it. But what adaptation does is say, hey, we can't necessarily go 3 hours. You very well know runtimes in movies were set to 90 minutes to maximum of like 120 minutes, all up until the point that Peter Jackson made The Lord of the Rings.
Right.
And then people stopped giving a shit and you got 3-hour movies. And people were like, oh, whatever, we'll just spend $800 million making this film 3.5 hours long. And filmmaking changed at that time. After The Lord of the Rings, people looked at what Peter Jackson made and they were like, it's really long, it's really pretty, it's really epic, it made a shitload of money. Obviously, that's the formula for success. 3-hour movies that are way over bloated with CGI and tell incredibly epic, sweeping stories. That wasn't the case early on. Early on, they had to be efficient. Early on, they had to be tight on the budget. Early on, you had to use technique. So you had to chop things out of the narrative because there just wasn't enough time to pack in all that story. And you're going to lose the scenes that are non-essential to the storytelling. We're going to break it down to its component parts, its skeleton. You take the skeleton from the book and then you build up the meat on top of those bones and you skin that with the director providing all of the cosmetic details to make the film version of that text. And it's really hard to do, but I understand because it said edited by, and you were like, this motherfucker ruined my book. And I get where that comes from. Editing in prose, editing in comics especially, is a very different process. And I'm going to turn this over to Oden now because I am also an editor, not just a writer. And there are 3 types of editing that editors do in comics. You have developmental, which is when you have a pitch and you're making an outline and you're going through all of the elements, developing the story, then creating the plot, things that happen in order, in sequence, to tell that story, and then populating it with characters that do things in sequence in order to tell that story. And then you get to the script. Once that development process is complete and you move on to scripting, there's something called line editing. Line editors come in, they look at the script, they say, is the script doing what the outline wants it to do? Yes or no. If it's not, this is why, or this is where the script is falling short. It's your job to go fix it. They'll also work on dialogue. If dialogue isn't properly conveying the element of storytelling that a character is capable of doing to push the narrative forward, this is extraneous. This is awkward. This needs rephrasing or elimination entirely. If the narrative voice of a character, it doesn't land, it isn't compelling. I just gave someone this example earlier today. When you read something like, you said Star Wars, right? Han Solo talks differently than Luke Skywalker, so much so that in your mind, they have different voices. And if you were to read Star Wars out loud, Luke sounds a certain way and Han sounds a different way. That's narrative voice. And you need to be able to extrapolate that and infer from the text what those characters sound like just by reading the words on the page. That's what line editing is going to help you do because it's part of doing the script. And then in comics, after that, there's art editing. And when you're doing art, you're an art director, whatever, it's looking at the layouts on the page, starting with thumbs. Then you're organizing panel structure. Then you're organizing character staging. Hopefully the writer has got a good grasp of this and in the script has an understanding of flow and layout so that they can convey what they see on the page to the artist. And once the artist is interpreting it their way, but the writer's going, yeah, it's exactly what I saw in my head. You have the synthesis, the union of text and art that create the comic book. And the editor knows all they have to do is maintain the necessary visual imagery to give the thumbs up and say, yeah, the flow on this page works. It attains the Z, the readability Z. There's clarity in the storytelling of the panels. And they could just nod their head and go, great, you don't need to change anything. If something's wrong, they'll go, hey, you're jumping 180 here and you don't need to. There's no justification for it. This character is looking the wrong way in this panel. So-and-so speaks first, so he shouldn't be second in the panel. There's just like things you learn when you're doing comics as an art editor that are basic elements. And then of course there's like anatomy and color and all that other stuff. I'm not the greatest art editor, but I am developmental and I am line editing. And like I said, now I'm going to turn it over to Oden because I've actually edited Oden, and he can tell you how horrible I am and how much of a mean asshole I can be.
So here's the thing. I'm like I do editing as well. And I'm a writer. Editors are the stopgap, right? And I know that Neff says like, oh, he knows how terrible I can be. Neff is not terrible when it comes down to editing. He will tell you exactly why something doesn't work. And sometimes, yeah, that sucks to hear, but you need to hear it because if something doesn't work, if it doesn't contribute to your narrative, that is a chance for you to lose your audience. And the moment that you sever that connection, the moment the suspension of disbelief is shattered, you aren't going to get them back, or it's very difficult to. And what the editor is there to do is to be the stopgap and make sure that the story is as tight as it can possibly be, to the point where that suspension of disbelief may bend, but it will never break. And Neff is rough. As I said, 9 drafts on this. And, you know, Neff credits me with like tenacity and being able to push through. There were times where I wanted to throw my phone across the room because I couldn't figure something out. And yeah, that can be frustrating. But at the end of the day, the story, if the story you are trying to tell means something to you, which it should, you're the one writing it, you need to be able to listen to somebody who is in this position to tell you, hey, this doesn't work. And if you aren't willing to listen to that, what's going to end up happening is that book's going to come out, and most people aren't going to ask that question. 9 out of the 10 people won't ask that question, but that one person.
But some guy, that one nerd sitting in the audience is gonna catch you, and he's gonna go, so why don't the Star Furies make it there in time if they can fly, you know, X speed, blah blah blah.
And that's the whole point is, and then the moment that question gets asked, it's a domino effect, because then everybody goes, wait, that's a really good point. And now they're looking for other inconsistencies in your work. And that's all they're going to focus on. The red pen is your friend. You need the red pen to come in and touch up your dialogue. You need the red pen to come in and say, hey, this page that you have here shouldn't be 1 page, it should be 2. You need the red pen to come in and be like, hey, the flow on this page, the artwork in here is technically great, but the way that this page flows doesn't work. It doesn't follow the rules. You aren't following the Z pattern that you're supposed to do, where you're having the art guide the reader's eye naturally across and down the page. The editor
you don't want to fight. You don't want to fight with that art, right? You want to make it easy for the readers so they can just appreciate the beauty of the page, and the word balloons are where they need to be in order for them to hit those with their eye. Look, I have dyslexia. When I was born, I had a midbrain injury. My eyes did not converge. I had to go through therapy to make them converge. I'm very sensitive to visual cues, right? So looking at a page of art, I can kind of know what the lowest common denominator is going to feel when they're looking at art going, that's off, that doesn't look right, and it's hard for me to see this page. My eyes don't want to look at that bubble. When I follow the eye guide on this page, this panel is completely missing. I noticed it entirely. Like Oden said, this will beat the crap out of your story and break it down to its core components. And then if you've got an editor that's willing, you two can hammer on it until it's made of iron, right?
Yeah.
Or steel,
Well,
right?
and
It's iron gets tempered into steel, right? That's the thing.
That's the other thing is, you know, what you had asked initially was, you know, if an editor was going to take something out that meant that meant something to you as a writer. If you have an editor worth their salt, They're going to know when something is important, and they're going to know is like, okay, we can't take this out because this is like the heart of what you're trying to accomplish. So how do we fix everything around it to make sure that this moment sings? Because that's the important, like it, like the only stuff that you're ever going to have, like, a client that I had years ago that I worked with, I was going through their script, and I talked to them about how this sequence was flowing, because the way that he had done things in his book would have confused people. I spent 4.5 hours on the phone with him explaining why the way that he set everything up would confuse the readers, and how he was jumping back and forth between these separate things instead of just making it one continuous flow. And by the end of that conversation, he realized that I was right. And that's what the editor is there to do. He or she is there to guide you towards the best version of what your story can be. It is not a matter of, oh, let me just cut this out because I know better. It is, I understand what you are trying to do. I want to help you get there.
What
But
you
where
should
you are,
be asking, Mr.
yeah,
Timescales, what you should
exactly.
be asking is, as an editor, what do you do when the writer you're trying to help doesn't want to take your notes? What do you do when you see the flaw in the composition, the weakness in the dialogue, the lack of fun aesthetics? When you see the plot hole and they don't want to fill it, they don't want to rephrase it, they don't want to patch it or alter the page. It's your job to make this thing as good as it could possibly be, and they are willfully preventing you from doing that. So what do you do? That's a question.
That's a good question. That's a good question. What do you do?
You set their house on fire. No,
I tell I part ways. If you're not
I
going to let
don't.
me do my, if you're not going to let me do, if you're bringing me here to do a job and you aren't going to let me do it, I'm not going to waste your money, and I'm not going to waste my time.
Okay.
I'll tell you why I think it is so important to make the change, or why it is significant to make the change. Like Oden said, he was on the phone for 4 hours. If that's necessary, I'll do it. Some more professional, more industry capable editors will tell you I would never do that. I'm not going to waste my time for 4 hours on the phone if this jackass isn't going to take what I say as gospel. You hired me to preach the gospel to you of what works and what doesn't. If you don't want to listen to my words, that's your problem. I'm not going to try and convince you. If the project is important enough to me, and I really only take on projects that I think are important, I don't get hired as an editor in the industry. It's not my job, so I can afford to be more selective. I can afford to say, yeah, I want to work on this project. I think you've got something cool. Let's make it good. I'm not sitting here getting farmed out to do editing work on 10 different projects a month where I don't have the time and may not even really care about this book that I'm been hired by Marvel to do. I'm just going to nod my head and say, okay, you're on deadline. It's fine. It's good enough. And that's where we get the situation we're currently in. I'm going to actually work with a writer or an artist and explain this is why it is the way that it is and the way that I see it. If you don't want to make that change, you're going to have to address those issues. If you create a plot hole, right, or you create an inconsistency, we all know that inconsistency now exists. So you're going to have to answer for that inconsistency later. Do you have a plan to do that? Otherwise, I'm going to tell you that something in your script is broken. If you're going to make a layout that purposefully violates the eye guide, right? Well, maybe we can fix that a different way. Maybe we can fix it with color. Maybe there are ways that the editor can lean in and say, let me work a little bit of magic. If this were a movie, let me use light, use sound, let me use staging, let me use whatever to cover that problem, but you have to account for it. Otherwise, like Oden said, it's going to sit there as a glaring inconsistency, problem, obstacle for the audience to access the text itself, because it's a flaw and people see the flaw. People may not be able to know what the flaw is. They may not be able to articulate why it's a flaw,
but
but
they
they
can
see.
feel it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so moving on past editing, we're going to wrap it up here with Judex. And Judex is going to be the last part. Just got a couple more questions for you guys about that. But before that, I wanted to ask you about Comicsgate CG. And the reason being is that it was just several months ago when I discovered the independent comic creators scene. I think I got a YouTube suggestion to watch a live stream from Jay and John up in Winnipeg, Canada, of Desolate Souls Studios. And I'm so glad I watched that program because that introduced me to the world of independent comics creators. I had no idea how big it is right now. And then I started hearing or seeing people in chat talking about Comicsgate or shortened for CG. I'm like, Comicsgate, that doesn't, it doesn't have a very positive feel. But it reminds me of Watergate. I'm like, Comicsgate? What in the world
Gamergate.
is that? Yeah, or Gamergate. So I I don't have an opinion on it. And I know that, and it's because I don't understand it. I've asked a couple of creatives, what does this mean? And I sort of get it from what people have explained to me. But before we get to Judex, if you guys could really briefly touch on Comicsgate and let me know what is your take on it.
Do you want me to jump on this grenade or do you want to take it?
A
I got it.
grenade?
So to put it in short is it is a manifestation of a schism in comics in general. You had consumers and creatives who weren't happy with how the mainstream was handling characters, IP, etc., that everybody had grown up with. And so and with especially with I think it was a 2016 election, political beliefs became a line in the ground in the mainline industry, and so you had a lot of people who felt more right on the political spectrum that kind of went off and did their own thing. What it has grown into is an independent scene that is meant to be a consumer movement, and you'll hear a million and one different things from each side of what this is. I honestly think that what Comicsgate is supposed to be is a consumer led movement that values merit in books, accountability on product, and responding to critique without acting like a child, and grow and trying to grow. Now there are, just like with anything, like with any sort of group or anything like that, there are certain people that say and do dumb things, and that gets things painted in a bad light in certain areas, and that happens on all sides. And there's a lot of name calling and a lot of drama where there shouldn't be. And I think that that's ultimately one of those driving things. For me personally, I have had nothing but positive experiences with the people that I've interacted in that community. I've never been one to like throw the hashtag around because I don't care about that. I just want to make books.
Okay.
But like ultimately, it's become a pretty reliable network of people who want to see independent creators rise up above their to get their books in stores and be competitive on the same level as what they are in the mainstream. And that's what I think is at the heart of everything. But I do think that there are some voices that end up polluting and muddying the water that make it a bit more difficult for it to grow beyond that because they're focusing on the wrong things.
Okay.
All right, I'm
Gotcha.
gonna kick the beehive now.
Okay.
So you ask a dozen people what Comicsgate is, you're going to get half a dozen different answers.
Okay. All
And
right.
if you check out Michael Bancroft's channel, because I know you've done an interview with him,
Mhm.
he has a really cool video series that's like trying to set the record straight or something like that. There is a chronology to Comicsgate. So as a movement, right, there are a lot of things that happened in sequence that have led to people coming up with conclusions about it. Once they come up with and they make up their mind about something, they don't stick around to see it grow beyond that. So when Richard C. Meyer calls someone a cum dumpster in a video that he posts, people clutch their pearls and go, Comicsgate is a hateful place full of bigoted people. Well, I can see how you would think that. I can. But you haven't stuck around since 2017 to see what this group of individuals who were not afraid to bite their tongue and be polite have grown into. And I think Oden really nails it, that what it's become is a group of consumers who are sick and tired of being tossed around and kicked in the teeth by the big two specifically. I'm going to say the big two, not mainstream, because mainstream implies it exists in a way for people to access it. Spawn is mainstream. Okay, like it is. Everyone knows
Yeah.
the word, the name Spawn. There are industry comics like Boom, Dynamite, IDW. There are closer to indie publishers like Scout, like Band of Bards, like Antarctic Press. So there are gradations, I would say, in comics as far as like professional comics. But what people are really reacting to when you talk about Comicsgate is the big two. Uh, Writers coming in and retroactively changing elements of classical characters for
Mhm.
seemingly political reasons or politicized reasons. Maybe the writer wasn't actually trying to change it to promote their feminist agenda, but people pick up on that, and when it says that on the shirt, you kind of think, oh, that's probably what they're doing. And people react a certain way. Maybe temperance would have been a better way to react. Maybe diplomacy. But this is the freaking internet. And people on the internet act like fools. So you're going to get a lot of people who have avatars and names next to their avatars acting aggressively or pejoratively, right? And that's going to offend people on the other side, which is how you get what Oden said, these people who have kind of polluted something. I'll say it was kind of like a gatekeeping movement in the beginning. It was, hey, we're doing comics. These are the type of comics we want. We're going to keep people out of the space that we're creating for the comics that we want to create that aren't the type of comics that we're being given from the industry.
Okay.
That's all. That's what I know from the history of it. I wasn't
Okay.
really around Comicsgate until 2019. So I've seen the retrospectives. The Comicsgate that I experienced was people like Mike, both Bancroft and Oden. It was people like Kimasabe, people like Joe Sontag, people who have created comic books, and people like Snuggie Jr., who purchase comic books and want to see independent, smaller creators get the attention and financial support that they need in order to become a more dominant force in industry comics. It didn't start off with people wanting to go to stores. It started off with ex-pros wanting to have an audience who would buy the things that their creator-owned titles that they want to make, that they weren't being allowed to make at the big two or in more industry-focused comic book studios. But then they were kind of like crapped on because of their politics. So they left to make their own thing and found an audience in these other individuals who kind of created this space. Those consumers, I think, want good comics. They want comic books that don't have politics taking over the text. Politics are supposed to be subtext, but these days it can feel like the subtext is so thinly veiled that it becomes the text. That's not fun. Nobody wants to read that. And yet we're being told that that's what comic books is offering. Well, let's make our own comic books. So I think at this point, it has become a competitive spirit within this group to raise the bar on each other, but ultimately all of us are trying to raise the bar on industry comics as a whole in reaction to the lesson that the big two continue to refuse to learn. Personally, I don't care about Marvel, Disney, or DC anymore. I'm making the comics that I'm making, reading the comics that my peers are making, reading industry comics from smaller publishers that I think, have it going on, right? Like, I know some people don't like it, but I like Mad. I love Image. I think Image puts out a lot of good titles, right? I like Mad Cave. I like the stuff that they're doing. I like Boom with Something's Killing the Children, Yeah, I
Murder
think
Falcon made me cry.
Murder
Wow.
Falcon was, yeah. I remember when I said that to you, I was like, look, Image Skybound is the imprint that's doing that. They're a little bit more experimental. They're willing to take on stuff that wouldn't traditionally succeed in the mainstream environment.
That's one of the things that Image is good about, though, because even if you go to their submission site, their whole thing is, we don't want you submitting pitches for our existing IP. We only want we want you to pitch your creator owned stuff, and if it's something that we think we can market, that's what we'll do. And I think that that's a very admirable thing, and I do agree. I think Image is one of the better companies of the what you would have be like a more typical industry company, because they are trying to push diversity in storytelling, and that's where the majority of my comic book purchases had been, outside of some brief stints here or there, for the past 15 years. Like Five Ghosts of Fabian Gray was one of my favorite books.
Yeah.
They're great. I'm still waiting for them to come back. Like they owe me a final arc, and I'm mad.
But not everyone, a lot of people say that comics are dead and there are no good comics. These are all good comics. These are all current comics that you can find on the stands if you go to your store and you look, right? Behold Behemoth, Briar, Good Boy. All of these comic books are worth reading because they're good stories. They have good characters. They're not beleaguered by politics. There's plenty of good comics out there that are in the industry, that are from publishers that are going to stores, that are releasing trades to Barnes and Nobles, that are in book venues and comic book shops, that show up at conventions. Why not us? Why not make these our contemporaries? Why not make these the people that we are competing with? Why try and spite and strike out at the Marvel and DC big two propaganda machines? I don't think that that's worthwhile. I don't think we'll ever actually win, right? Because they don't care about what we have to say. Maybe we'll win over fans, but Marvel and DC don't care about what we are trying to do. They're consolidating their own monopolies. But if we get into, talking to people who are making books in the industry and they see the books that we're making and value them and say, hey, that's some good shit, man. Like, welcome.
Hang on.
Party.
Show that again. You just had Mavericks right there.
This book right here. This awesome. Look at the cover on this. Maybe it's because it's a boutique book. It has special cover treatments and stuff, and it's super oversized. And like, this is a regular comic trade, and this is Mavericks. Look how much book you're getting. Right?
Yeah,
like,
nice.
They're like very similar in thickness, right?
Right. Hey, what was that? We're gonna move on to Judex and then AI to wrap this up.
AI is a great story. There's some decent pages in this book, I'd say. Like,
nice.
I think you should pick it up, man. It's available digitally.
Okay. Yeah, I will. I'll get it. Oh, you said you can get it digitally?
Yeah, you can get it digitally.
Okay. Well, I think I might like a hard copy.
That's better, in my opinion. The hardcover is the way to go, or the hard copy is the way to go.
The hard copy, yeah.
Also, you'll notice
physical.
I'm gonna plug it real quick. Unlike a book like Homesick Pilots, which is great, it's a good book. You can see the binding here it's perfect bound, right? But it's just glued, right? So you're gonna get it open this much Otherwise, when you pull, it's going to crinkle and crack.
Right.
And if you're opening normally, you're going to get about that amount, and you're losing a certain percentage of the page in the gutter to the binding because it was released as floppies, and those are saddle stitched, not perfect bound. So unless you're offsetting your internal gutters, the margins on the inside by the spine, you're losing some of the art, you know. Mavericks is sewn in. I don't know if you can see it, like really, really carefully see here.
Was that
But
more expensive to have done?
oh yeah, absolutely.
It
But
is.
it opens flat. You know what I mean?
Right.
You can't like crack the spine too hard. Like you can pull on it because it's sewn in groups of 12. So it's
Okay.
like each of those 12 pages is saddle stitched like a comic. So it opens all the way wide, just like a regular issue, regular floppy, how you open that and you see the whole thing. So Mavericks is done like that. Yeah, it is more expensive. But I thought, like, we have a big oversized book, 108 pages. I don't want to fall prey to the problem of having anything in the, you know, be too close to the gutters in the middle that get
Right.
lost. And so
Right.
do that. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about it being a consumer movement. Creators in CG and in this indie comic sphere, because people are like CG adjacent or CG friendly. Nobody knows what it is anymore.
Right.
Those people are focused on making it good for consumers. They're willing to spend that much more thoughtfulness on creating the product and that much more money creating it. And in response, the customers are like, fucking thank you. I'm willing to pay the $3 to $5 upcharge that it costs to make the book that much better, that much more
Right.
quality, because it's attention to detail. And that's what I like about it, because it's like, look at the raising of the bar, right? Like you don't get sewn in bindings. Although it's
Right.
funny, you're starting to see it now. You're starting to see some of the more industry comics use sewn in bindings because they want to go in that big oversized format. DC has Black Label. Just saying, you know, maybe they're learning some lessons from us.
Okay. Hey, before I forget, you went and grabbed a novel off of the shelf. What was that?
Oh, this is one of the books that convinced me to want to write sci-fi. This is The Long Run by Daniel Keyes Moran, and no one knows who Daniel Keyes Moran is.
Okay.
That's what I got to say. Like, I mean, he's going to hate that I said that, but most people will know Brandon Sanderson, you know, or they'll know Robert Jordan, or they'll know Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, these great names of sci-fi and fantasy, right? They won't know people like Daniel Keyes Moran, who wrote some of the most compelling sci-fi that I've read. He wrote the Emerald Eyes series, but The Long Run is specifically my favorite one. And I've read that book many a time, and I love that book. So when you were talking about reading Star Wars, I was like, yeah, there was one book, like there was for you with Star Wars. There
Right.
was one book for me that did it, and it was The Long Run.
And who is The Long Run by?
Daniel Keyes Moran.
Okay. Cool.
Like I said, you're Daniel Keyes
Keys
Moran.
Moran. Okay. Okay. All right. Cool. So we're going to finish up with Judex. And what I'm wondering, I looked at your fundraiser this morning.
We are doing
It was
terribly. We are doing so
well,
bad.
I think you have busted that thing by 1700%. I don't remember
It
what you
doesn't
said the
matter.
beginning was. Yeah, you're sitting at about 8 grand right now. And that
Yeah,
makes,
we
you know,
should be sitting at 18. We
okay.
should be well above 10. I'd say at this point in the campaign, 30 days in, we should be at 12.
Okay.
Mavericks made 30 grand. And it was our first book on Indiegogo. Right now, we are what is called shadow banned. Now, Indiegogo doesn't actually shadow ban projects. If you check their webpage, they, you know, their helpline, they don't tell you that they don't. But they also don't answer any of their emails. Their support center isn't helpful. There are no human beings to contact to ask why your campaign doesn't show up in the comic book section when you click on comic books. Why isn't my comic book in the comic book section in what would be called Explore? Why doesn't my comic book show up on the website when you type Judex into the search bar? It's undiscoverable on the website. So why am I paying you 6% of everything I make fundraising on your website when you're not giving me any assistance? In fact, you are hiding my campaign actively to be undiscoverable on your website.
It's
You're
not the
offering me a
first time I've heard
platform.
this.
No, no,
Yeah,
no. Like,
yeah,
it's happening to a lot of people.
yeah. So
Honestly, that's one of the things that you'll hear a lot of people say. It's, oh, because you're affiliated with Comicsgate, or you're Comicsgate adjacent, you're getting censored. I don't know how true that is. I would say that that's probably violating some sort of civil liberties clause. If that's the case, it said it's probably financial interference in the sustainability of my business for the persecution of political reasons. But whatever, that's, if you want to get sued, that's your problem. The point remains that Indiegogo is not being supportive of this particular project. They were very supportive of Mavericks. They've been very supportive of Oden's other campaigns. SBQR did well. Elysian Fields did well. The Embrace did well. None of those were put into the purgatory of non-discoverability. The only reason you can find our campaign right now is that we're running Google ads.
Yeah.
So you have to type Judex Indiegogo or Judex crowdfunding into the search bar in Google, and then we'll show up as the first result. But if you type in Judex into the search bar in Indiegogo, you find nothing.
Yeah, it won't.
Go
It
to the
won't.
comics
Okay.
book page and you scroll through all of the comic books on the website, scrolling down, so you will not find our comic.
Wow.
They've actively gone out of their way to kind of old yeller our campaign. It kind of feels like like Neff even called me. I think it was like the end of the second day, because we outpaced what he was expecting by a good deal.
Yeah, we made $6,000 by day 2.
Yeah, like
As you can see,
we
it's been a month and we're only at 8.
yeah, like
Okay.
it definitely slowed down a lot. And it was very disheartening, especially after having such a hot start
Right.
where we had kind of crushed it and really happy with how things were going. And now, and on top of that, you're trying to schedule out shows and trying to figure out, where to go and what have you. And, Neff and them were in Japan right before launch. And then I had a business trip for work. So there was a lot of stuff where we were trying to get stuff done, for the campaign and getting shows set up. But like, people book up fast, and it had been a while since I'd run a campaign. And so I hadn't really kept up with who was even still streaming at that point. And there were even a whole bunch of people I reached out to that used to do promo that don't do promo anymore. So it's been a tough road for our campaign. But
I think that it's not so much scheduling shows with people. If you know people, then you go,
yeah,
hey, can I come on your show to plug my book?
Right.
Discoverability is for people who do not know who you are, who are first just now hearing about the name of your book and want to go, Judex, what's that? Let me go to Indiegogo and type in Judex because I don't know anything about it. I'm hearing this by word of mouth. And if
Okay.
you can't do that, you can't back my campaign. Everyone who we've got is someone that we have brought to the campaign page by going on shows and interacting with fans. Now, it's true, campaigns slow down significantly after the first 2 days. If you watch any of the trending graphs from either Kickstarter or Indiegogo, any crowdfunding website, it'll show you that the first day is high, the second day is a little lower, and then it usually bottoms out but goes up again towards the end. It's a universal curve in crowdfunding. The problem is, we went to here, dropped, and there has been very little activity other than the days that we've gone on shows. I've actually received emails from people on my email list going, I can't find your campaign. Or when we go to conventions, we have to have QR codes for people to scan because we tell them about it and they come back later and went, I couldn't find your campaign on Indiegogo. Well, that's why you scan the QR code. Like, we gave it to you here, just zap it with your phone.
Okay.
But I don't see it on the website. Exactly. You need the direct link to go there.
Right.
And I think
Okay.
that has seriously damaged us, because when we were doing Mavericks, we had a considerable amount of backers that were consistently backing this book for the duration of the campaign because we were discoverable on the website.
Okay. Now, it makes me wonder, why in the world would they not want backers? Because if they're getting 6% of it, they would want it to go to the moon. You would think.
Yeah, you would think, and you would think that they would get back to you when you contact support and when you open a ticket, when you send emails directly to specific people with @Indiegogo at the Indiegogo.com
Right.
name. You would think that someone would get back to you. No, you would think that when you open up a ticket, they would respond to that rather than just marking the ticket closed without
Wow.
conferring with anybody. You
That's
would think.
terrible.
I mean, one of the reasons that I thought, oh, maybe it's the subject matter. Judex is about a character wearing a mask during the Nazi occupation of France, who is passing judgment on the occupiers of that city and the people who have turned their back on their own culture. And there are Nazis in the pages, on the pages, with the armband, and there are swastikas in the pages on like propaganda in the background, because that's what there was at the time. It's the setting, but those guys are the bad guys. So I thought maybe it might be the subject matter, maybe it might be
Right.
something offensive. I would really like you to tell me if that's the case, but they don't have anything in their terms and services about that. And you would think if you could contact support and be like, hey, is the problem these things, if I removed the preview pages from the campaign entirely, would we be able to be found again in your search?
But they don't answer you.
Nothing.
That-
Yeah, they don't
okay,
answer,
yeah.
and they haven't reacted to anything that we've done to try and alter the campaign to make it more politically correct.
Okay. Now, since we're running out of time here, this seems like a really good place to knock out 5 of the 6 remaining questions, just all in one fell swoop.
Sure.
Have you guys considered using Fund My Comic, self-publishing on Amazon, or selling directly on Etsy and eBay?
Yes. We
Okay.
have
Yeah,
considered
just
all of those
as
things.
a short
Okay, very
thing.
good.
All
Okay.
all of them, and even Kickstarter, I believe, as well.
Okay,
Well, we're going to
perfect.
be launching a Kickstarter after the Indiegogo campaign reaches its conclusion at the end of the
Yeah.
next 30 days. We even have a whole series of different covers, including a different main cover and a different crossover planned for that. That's because when we do a crowdfunding campaign, you think about this shit. I don't like Etsy. I'd be willing to explore Fund My Comic more extensively, or consider running a campaign there once I see some sort of returns. I know Luke Stone personally, and we've talked about running a campaign there, but I don't know if we're ready yet to put our book up on Fund My Comic as a campaign. We do have our own website. It's theglobalfrequency.org. You will be able to order Judex directly through us. I also don't like going to eBay and running it as an eBay store, because then eBay takes a percentage. So if you have a website, why not just sell directly through there? So Etsy and eBay are kind of out in that regard. But there's also Whatnot, right? Whatnot is a platform where you can auction off special covers, collectors items, Judex masks that come with comic books,
Oh,
things
cool.
things that people want, special collectibles. So there's plenty of ways to sell the book and make money doing that. Conventions, people have reacted very positively. Oden will tell you he sold, I don't even know how many.
I think by the end of Otakon, I had moved almost 60 books of the previews.
So here's the question. Why hasn't that converted into sales, especially since we have a tier where it's the book plus free shipping anywhere in the continental US for $10 flat?
I don't have.
Which
I don't
means
have.
shipping's usually $5, right? Like if you get something off
I
of
genuinely
eBay, or
do not have a good answer for that.
yeah. So why don't we have 60 more backers? Because we've sold these teaser comics Why haven't they gone, oh wow, that's a $5 comic book? Sure, here's $10. Send me this book. It's 30 pages. It's the art is incredible. Read the dialogue in the sample pages. It's quite good. Like there's no reason to not be getting this book.
I
At
saw
the
where you even have a coin.
yeah,
Yes.
It's this
Yeah.
right here. Yeah. This is the Marion coin. It's
Yeah.
collectible coin on the $20 tier. It's not
Mm-hmm.
available on the $10 tier. It's only available on the $20 tier, along with the glow in the dark print from Rich Ayala. But the $10 tier is just the comic, and it's shipped free shipping. The $20 tier has this stuff plus all of the stretch goals that get unlocked, which to date, it is a die cut bookmark, thick die cut like paperclip style bookmark that is, the shape of Judex. It's by Dean James. 3 die cut chibi stickers, a skunk artworks art print that also glows in the dark,
I saw
and
that. Yeah.
and 2 trading cards. The next stretch goal we're unlocking is a collectible copy of the Cassini map, which is, a map from, back in the 1600s.
17th century.
France, which has all of the little landmarks that have been drawn in by Judex. And if we're doing it on paper, we might even be doing reactive ink. So if you shine the black light on it, you can find his secret hidden tunnels that he uses in
Cool.
France. Like there's
Okay.
no reason that this book has not already broken 10 to 12K. If this had been like, if I'd have the availability of discoverability of my last campaign, we would be, sailing smoothly on the sea. But right now we're stuck at 8.
Okay. All right. Now, I'm going to, we're pushing 2 hours here, and I had asked you guys for 90 minutes, so my apologies for running over. I've got
I talk a lot.
Well, that's cool. That is really good. And because this is educational and people will learn from it. And I have one more question on marketing, and then I'm just going to ask you about the printing and shipping process, such as if you picked your own printer and as if you're using the postal service or UPS or whatever. And then I want to ask you guys briefly about your feelings on AI, and then we're going to wrap it up. So on the fundraising, when you get a new backer, I've never done one of those before, so I don't know how it works, but I have this vision of when you get a new backer that all of a sudden you get a ping, your email that says you have a new backer or you have a new order or something. Okay.
That is actually
Okay.
how that works.
All right. Now, what I'm wondering is how does that feel? Do you consider each and every single one of those consumers to be somebody that you just genuinely appreciate? How does it feel when you get a new backer, be it Bob Smith in Paducah, Kentucky, or somebody in Japan? Now, how does it actually feel when you get a new backer? Does that give you a renewed sense of success, like I'm doing something right, or oh, this person's going to love this? How does it actually feel when you get a new backer?
Oh,
So-
you take the romanticism.
what I will say is that it honestly, like it depends on which stage of the campaign you're in. I mean, obviously getting more backers is always, great, and it makes you feel like you're doing everything right and what have you. But generally campaigns have influx of activity, right? So like you're going to have like a lot of backers the first few days, and then you start to slow down. And when it slows down, that's when those occasional ones that come in go, oh, awesome, we got a few new backers today. And like, that feels really good. But all in all, I mean, obviously it's good to have the support. It's good to get those emails. It's motivational, but and especially if you've gone a while and you haven't seen one. So yeah, like I think that pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
I think it's great when you see somebody's name that you don't know, and I value those a lot.
That especially is I don't recognize this name. You haven't backed any of my previous projects. That means that I hit somebody new.
We have a record of everyone who backed Maverick. So we have 500 names on a list, and we had to mail these things out to everybody who backed, right? So in a way, it's like,
Mhm.
oh, we know you, right?
Right.
So it was really exciting when we made that list the first time, because it's like these people want a thing that I made. That is so dope. And I'm
Nice.
grateful every time they come back. I'm like, yeah, Rick Saylor is ordering my book again. But then there's someone I've never heard of. I'm like, oh, I don't know how this person found me. Certainly wasn't through Indiegogo, I'll tell you that much. But they found me and they thought my thing was cool. I'm all about it. I'm always jazzed up because it's like there's another individual who thinks what I'm doing is cool and worthwhile and is willing to give me money and for it. And then there's the part of my brain who's going, how much did they back? How much does that contribute to the campaign? What does the box that I'm going to have to make for them look like? How much can I estimate the shipping on that is going to be? And like, then that part of the brain goes into work mode, right? So
Okay.
there is a romantic element of someone loves my stuff. And then okay, what did they order? How do I get it to them?
Right.
Where do they
Right.
live? Are they in Australia? God damn it. Why is everyone in Australia order my stuff? It costs so much money to go to Australia. So,
Yeah.
there's a practical side.
Gotcha. Okay. So, did you pick your own printer?
Yes, you
Okay.
always
Yeah.
have.
Do you go with large commercial printers, or do you go with mom and pop small town printers?
Both, because large commercial printers can't necessarily do the boutique finishes that I want on my books that smaller mom and pop printers take the time to do. Like if I wanted a soft touch laminate with embossed spot gloss, I'm not going to get that from the printer that prints phone books, because they print volume, they print thin paper, they use a certain press, whatever. They do stationery, they do greeting cards, they do whatever. So for me, I have to use what are called specialty printers. First of all, they have to be able to do the type of binding that we like. For Mavericks, they have to do a 9x12 book, which means you have to have a different printer than the regular printer that you're printing floppies or even graphic novels that are the regular size on. Then there's offset versus digital printing, right? And so the question is, which one are you going with determines the type of paper you're using. Originally, and still, Mavericks was offset printing, and getting offset printer paper at the size necessary to run in the printer that Mavericks needed to use, because it was 9x12, was very difficult at the end of 2020 and 2020, beginning of 2021. So it threw off our delivery schedule because we couldn't get the paper, that our printer that we picked couldn't get the paper to fill our order. And they
Mhm.
strung us along and didn't tell us about it. And then they wanted to charge me an additional $12,000 because there you were paying market price for paper. Like when you
Yes,
go to the
paper
restaurant, it says
skyrocketed.
it says M when you go to buy lobster because it's like the market price. Yeah,
Right.
all the paper for oversized offset printer machines was M. It's not like you can't budget for M, right? So they were
Right.
like, it's going to be a whole lot more money, which is when we went and found alternative options for printing. We had to print outside the US, but that also meant that we had to readjust the binding because their bindings are an additional, I think, 16th of an inch wide, which means even more of the spine is taking up the art. These are the lessons you
Right.
learn when you're in this industry. And hopefully you have the money to be able to make those mistakes and order your proof copies and pay for the shipping for it to come from halfway around the world, and be able to handle damaged books, things like that. So printing is a experience in and of itself. It's something that you have to learn to do, especially if you want to do any sort of boutique anything. With Maverick or with Judex, we're doing glow in the dark ink on the Russ Leach cover. That is also a matte background with a textured spot gloss Eiffel Tower and logo on that. That's a specialty cover and a half. Try finding a greeting card company that prints glow in the dark ink. You can't find a commercial printer that necessarily does that, so you're going with a specialty print.
Isn't it
Luckily,
called?
we're only ordering a limited number of that cover, but when we order from that specialty printer, we're also ordering all of the main covers, all of the holochrome, holofoil covers, all, everything that we get printed, that we can get printed from that printer, we're getting, so that it all comes together in one package, and hopefully you can get discounts for volume. But generally, you have to, if you're doing special stuff, lean towards a mom and pop.
Okay, so the glow in the dark, isn't that called phosphorescent ink?
I guess, I don't know.
Yeah. I know that paper got really extremely expensive after the pandemic, but
Yeah, it was hard.
yeah. So what are you using for shipping? Is it US Postal Service?
So it's a mixture of both. We're using the US Postal Service with flat rate shipping for anything above £3. We're using Pirate Ship for a lot of our stuff, which helps reduce the overall shipping cost. We're using medium mail, the special medium mail, that's the below £1 deal for medium mail. Medium mail usually goes like up to £1, or there's a price for over £1 up to £2, and there's flat rate 2 and above. When we did Mavericks, all of the packages we sent out were like £6. So luckily, we only had to worry about doing flat rate, and we charged $10 shipping. So at the time, we were fine. We were covered. We didn't get hit with overages. But when shipping goes up, as it has since then, shipping doesn't go back down. So it's only getting more and more expensive to send this stuff around the world.
Okay. The very last question is aside from AI, if you guys want to go into AI, because we're pushing.
I don't think I've got the time. In all honesty, I actually have to roll out here to go pick up my kid here in the next 2 minutes.
Okay.
I got a play date with his. Well, I guess we're going to go see a film this evening. So. But
we can pretend Oden is here, but he's not really here, and it's okay.
Okay.
You're just talking to me. Like I dominate the talking anyway, right?
Okay. Oden, you're gonna peace out.
Yeah, I am. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great.
It was a pleasure getting a chat, and Neff, always a pleasure. But I do have to go.
Talk to you later, buddy.
It's really nice to meet you. Thanks for being on.
Odin will tell you all of the same stuff that I told you about printing.
Yeah, no, I know. I was just like, I'm going to take this opportunity because
right?
You can talk about printing all day. I do.
I mean, he's done it. You've done it too. You've done like 4 books. So
yes, yeah. So, anyways, I'll catch you guys here in a bit. Thanks so much.
Okay, bye. Take care. Thanks. Okay, Neff, as we wrap up here, can you tell me if you had to name one thing in this journey of creating independent comics, name one thing that was unexpected and or the most difficult thing that you encountered, what would that be?
I honestly think that the delays in fulfillment arising from the unexpected paper shortage after the pandemic was the hardest thing for us to navigate, because that delayed our shipping by 6 months.
Okay.
And it also created unintended problems with some of the books, not being up to quality that we wanted to sell. And we actually had to repair quite a few. So we learned how to, do book, what is it, like the special service that people do, book restoration, where you take like historical books and you repair damages and dirt and fix rips and spinal defects and stuff like that. So it was cool to get an education in that stuff to make more of our stock usable. But I think that was the hardest thing for us to adapt to, was the paper shortage.
Okay. Now, for anybody young or old that may be watching this, that has a dream or a goal to do the same thing that you guys have, maybe they have just started writing their story, maybe they're halfway through, maybe it's finished, maybe it's being illustrated, and they want to, let's say they're looking at the big numbers that you guys have pulled. They're like, oh, I want to pull in 20,000, or I want to pull in 8 or 10,000 to fund my project. Somebody that is looking at this to learn from you guys, to emulate what you're doing, do you have a single best piece of advice that you could give them?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Temper your expectations.
Okay.
There's a lot that goes into making a campaign successful. A lot of the really big numbers you see from former pros, like Mark Polton, John Malin, Ethan Van Sciver, Brandon Sanderson, right? Like people who have really high totals. Maybe Mark Pellegrini's not that great of an example because he's not actually a former professional to the degree that these other guys are, but they have their own audiences. Okay, Brian Polito, Lady Death, right? They have their own audiences that they're bringing to the platforms that they crowdfund on. Much like with us being shadow banned, I have to bring my audience to that platform. So the people who are backing them are a mix of people who have been ride or die with these guys for the past 10 years and new people who are hearing word of mouth about them from all of those people who have been ride or die for the past 10 years. If you're just getting into this and you don't have a marketing budget and the ability to run ads and you're doing this word of mouth for the ground up, you have to temper your expectations because you are not a 20-year veteran of the comic book industry. You are a brand new noob with no name who is cutting their teeth. And no matter how good your art is, they're not going to know that unless they read the book. No matter how good your story is, they're not going to know that unless they read the book. And convincing someone to read your book, to spend money on reading your book, well, you're dealing with price points and you're dealing with you're dealing with all of like the elements of selling a book. And if you're a brand new writer, you're probably a brand new marketer and brand new fabricator. You probably have no experience making these things with the campaign. So temper your expectations.
Okay.
The likelihood of you making 20 grand on your first time is directly proportional to the preparation and research that you do getting ready to run a campaign.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And as we wrap up here, do you actually believe that AI is a threat to arts and performing arts?
I don't believe that it's a threat. I think AI relies upon the people programming it, teaching it to achieve its function, right? I actually write a lot about AI and then the theory behind AI. And what I'm seeing in its practical use is that it's not very adaptive, right? We don't have strong AI yet. We have very weak AI. We have very easily misled AI, right? If you're talking about art, it needs persistent reinforcement, being told by programmers what's good, right? What is a good image and good art, or what is a particular style of art that is appealing in order for it to learn to reproduce that. So it's entirely dependent then upon the people who are feeding it that information and giving it that reinforcement to make AI successful at creating art or creating story. What AI can't do is create of its own accord spontaneously. It has to be told to do something. Even generative AI, where like you'll hear, oh, such and such AI painted a thing all on its own. Yeah, it had to be told to paint. It didn't just decide one day to start painting. So I don't think it's a threat. I think it's a tool. I think people can irresponsibly use tools. Hammers are not a threat to people. Yet if you run around hitting people in the head with hammers become a threat, but really it's you that's the threat, right? So I think if people use AI irresponsibly to make projects that aren't very good, but they tell AI that it is very good, or they try and use AI to make money, right? Without thinking about the long-term consequences of what making money with AI art, AI story, AI animation, any of the artistic endeavors, the long-term consequences of that, the ramifications are hard for those people to imagine. You really have to get high and think about the possibilities, right?
There you go.
You have to sit there and imagine all of the different things that could come out of AI mislearning something, or what could happen to the art industry if people start producing uncanny valley style images and flooding the market with AI art saying, oh, it's theirs, right? The real danger is not AI, it's people using AI poorly.
Okay, very good. All right, so as we wrap it up here, where do you like to be found online? You're on Twitter?
We are on Twitter. I think that's the most active platform. That's at the Global Freak with a Q for frequency.
Okay.
And we're also on Instagram. Our Instagram feed is where we post most of our art and stuff like that. Frequency Girl manages the Instagram. I manage the Twitter. Our DMs are open. So if you're trying to get a hold of us, that's where you should hit me up. And like follow us on Twitter because
Okay.
we only really do comic book stuff there. There's no like political nonsense in my feed. It's going to be art. It's going to be story related. It's going to be, hey, check out this project and whatnot. We also have our website, which is theglobalfrequency.org. Currently, we're migrating to a new server. So right now it's down, but it should be up within like the next 48 hours or so. And you'll be able to order all of the books in our repertoire that we as a publisher make available. So anything we're publishing, that will be Judex, right? Like that's a collaborative effort between me and Oden, but I'm the publisher of that book. So you'll be ordering it from me. You can also find Mavericks there. But if you're looking for Mavericks, go to mavericks.com because that's where all the cool stuff happens.
Okay, awesome. For those of you listening to this on audio stream, we're going to put links to these websites, Twitter and Instagram as well, on the YouTube video. So what you'll want to do is, if you're listening to this on audio alone, you'll want to go to the original interview on YouTube and look for the timescales interviews of Mike Oden and Aaron Neff. And there you will find the links to be able to order these. And thank these gentlemen for their time and their education today. And there's a very good possibility that you will find something that you will love. Neff, was there anything that I didn't?
You can find Oden on Twitter too. I think he's at _ Elysian Fields or something.
Yep, I have that one too.
Okay, good. So
yep.
definitely look for Oden also. If you're looking for anything about the history of Rome or anything having to do with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure or ridiculous manga stuff, follow him because he's a great resource for all of those things.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time today. Was there anything that I did not ask that you wish I would have?
No, I think you covered all of it.
Got it covered? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Neff. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. This has been very enjoyable and entertaining.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be on the show. Appreciate you having us.
And people are definitely going to be able to learn from it thanks to your generosity.
Oh, cool.
All right. Take care, man.
All right, bye.
Bye.